Tell you what, everybody, Big 12 coaches are telling it like it is. Absolutely telling it like it is. Whether you agree with them or not, whether you like it or not, they're here to preach the truth. We've got Mike Gundy, we've got Neal Brown, we've got Sonny Dykes, all popping off with some great quotes, some great audio. You're going to get to hear most of that. And I will react to most of it, including one from Sonny Dykes that was really my favorite, where he pretty matter-of-factly just outlined one of the ways that the SEC has really been rigging the game for a long time, rigging it in their favor. Just a little tweak, nothing too crazy, but it's a brilliant move and one of the things that they have been doing forever to keep everyone else at arm's length, and they will continue to do that, certainly for the Big 12. They are certainly going to keep the Big 12 at arm's length by this. That Sonny Dykes pointed out is something you don't get in the Big 12. And that is basically a reprieve at the end of the season. So I do want to open with that. I've got to give Neal Brown some props for what he said. He is raging on the SEC network. I feel like everybody should appreciate and like that. The guy went on SEC network and called out an ESPN reporter. I don't know who in Big 12 country would turn that down or be upset about that. And Mike Gundy, for those of you that aren't really a fan of the current state of NIL or college football or where things are at, I think he really stoked the fire and the flame of a lot of those people with some of his comments about agents, those pesky agents, just trying to be a little bit too involved. So I've got a lot of that. Let's see what else was on the outline here. That is the main. Oh, we've got some of your hot takes. We've got some of your Big 12 hot takes for the upcoming season to get to, because we are getting very, very close to the season. Snake, my guy, you are correct. This was the last weekend without college football until like January now here at this point, because next week it is week 0. So congratulations, everybody. We made it. And you know what? It calls for a little toast. Drink your water if you are me, along with me here on a Sunday night, for the fact that we made it, in essence, through the offseason. So that's what I've got today. If you have Big 12 hot takes, give me your hottest Big 12 take for the upcoming season. I'm here for it. I will continue to get you guys involved with that. So let me know in the chat. If you are watching on Twitter, you can hop on over to the YouTube chat to be able to participate here. Just John Kurtz on YouTube. You can find wherever you need to go there and then hop in. And if you want to make sure that your question or comment makes it on the live chat tonight, you can click the $ below the chat box. It will attach your question or comment to a donation, make it a super chat, which means you will get on the show tonight. But keep the comments coming regardless. If you are on Twitter, if you are anywhere watching this, but particularly I want to shout out the Twitter audience. If you guys are a Big 12 fan and you're unaware, make sure you get subscribed to the Open for Business newsletter. You can subscribe at ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of the YouTube video. But I am sending you all the Big 12 headlines you need twice a week, plus my insight and analysis coming along with that. So you will stay up to date on everything happening with the Big 12. If you want to be the smartest Big 12 fan in the group chat, that's how you do it. If you want your college football news without Big 10 or SEC bias or having to read everything through a filter for them, that's how you do it. ofbnews.com. Appreciate all of you guys. Like the video. That definitely really helps me as well if you could do that. All right. I see Snake here. Ron, cooking on wheels. I like that. Larry, Kyle, Francis, Houston Cougars, Germany. What's going on, Houston Cougars, Germany? Kyle, Roger. Got a lot of people filing in here. And I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. So let's kick this thing off with Sonny Dykes, man. I appreciate Sonny Dykes. He can be a little bit soft-spoken. He's not somebody I think of as being really vocal and loud and boisterous. And I don't know that I would say, I guess he's like over the top pissed here, but he is bringing up something that the SEC uses to their advantage that he does not have the advantage of using in the Big 12. The Big 12 is never going to be able to pull this off because of the constraints around money and needing to maximize everything for TV value at all costs. But I want to play you this full clip here from Sonny Dykes before I react to it and we get going. So here it is.
Those teams don't exist, but then there's no layups. You know what I mean? And a layup is a really important thing in college football. You know, that's why the SEC, I don't know if it's the most competitive league, but I can assure you one thing, it's the smartest league. Because they play those layups in week 10. Okay, and that's not by chance. That just didn't happen. That didn't fall out of the sky. I mean, they are very smart about doing that. They're very smart about having a conference games. They are very smart, twice as smart as anybody else when it comes to those things, putting their teams in the best position to be successful. That league is better than all the other leagues combined. So having said that, you know, they get a layup in week 10 or whatever that is, week 11, whenever that thing happens late in the year. We don't. It's just not the way the conference is built. So, but what I do like about this league is I really do believe whoever the worst team in this league is can beat the best team in this league. It can happen, it has happened, it will happen, and in other leagues, there's not a chance in hell it's going to happen.
Okay, so a couple of things to break down there from Sonny. First of all, if we're going to work backwards, the end of it there, I mean, he is right. Like, could you see Arizona State beating Oklahoma State? I picked Oklahoma State to to win the league. Could you see Arizona State beating Oklahoma State? Whoever, if you Cincinnati, Baylor, BYU, whoever you want to have at the bottom there. I think any of those teams, yes, definitely could on a given day do that. Can you see Vandy jumping up and beating Texas or Georgia? Probably not. That is probably not going to happen. But to his point about, man, it is always driven me nuts, the SEC scheduling philosophy here, because it's not like driving me nuts like, oh, these guys like cheating. What? It's like, man, they figured something out and they just utilize it and milk that thing every single year and help prop up their teams that they need to go produce in the postseason every single year. And nobody else has been able to pull it off like this. So week 10 last year, he brings up like the cream puff game at the end of the year, the end of the SEC schedule. Week 10 last year, Chattanooga, Louisiana Monroe, Georgia State, Abilene Christian, they were all on the schedule for those teams. They won the games by a combined 195 to 37. It is so smart for so many different reasons because the SEC, man, it's a grind, and you know every single year you're going to have teams that will be in the hunt for a national championship, and you want them to be as well rested and as ready to go at the end of the year as you possibly can. So why not throw in a de facto bye there? You may only have to play your starters for a quarter or two, get them out of there, get some guys rest. You could even just rest players for an entire game if you've got a star player that's a little bit banged up, and it's the perfect time for it. And then boom, you're ready to go down the home stretch. And you combine that with just the 8-game conference schedule that they have here too, and that really works in concert pretty well because now you're not playing a 9th conference game, which is 9 times out of 10 going to be tougher than your non-con. I understand SEC teams, it's not like they're dodging any Power 5 competition in their non-conference schedule, and a lot of them have the rivalry games at the end of the year. But in general, that's a pretty smart philosophy, especially now. I think both of these things become more valuable now for obvious reasons. First of all, the 8-game conference schedule, which I know the SEC has debated going to 9, and of course it all revolves around money. But the 8-game conference schedule now is probably even more helpful because the league got beefed up a little bit. Your average league game became stronger because Texas and Oklahoma are now in the thing. So you have even 2 other quality teams that you could get, whatever the random game is that you're going to pull out there for your 9th conference game if you were to have it. So it's multiplying its value right now. That aspect of it is certainly. Now, as I mentioned, that may not last forever, but it is the case now. I did find this Greg Sankey quote very, very funny when I was going through and reading about this and the debate about going to 9 conference games for the SEC. Craig Sankey told CBS this back in May, quote, "There's always factors. There's a lot more than money involved. We don't always do things despite what people say for money." Greg, come here, man. Come here. Be real with us. The least you could do is just be real with us. All right. It's all about money. We know what all of this is about. It is all about money. In the end, it's all about money. You can try and feign some other motivation. It's all about money. Perhaps if you want to tell me, no, it's all more about power. Okay, fine. That would be the only other thing that I think could fill in here for the money motivation. If you want to say, okay, a little more power than money, perhaps. But eventually that all comes back to the same thing. If you have more power, you exchange that power for money. It's all motivated by money. So, Greg, come on, man. Let's be real about this. But especially now, if you're doing this week 10, week 11 into the season, roll in Louisiana Monroe type of deal. Don't roll in New Mexico State. Just ask Auburn about how that went last year to the tune of a 3-touchdown loss. But if you're going to do that, it was smart before. It's even more smart now. The value of that is going up. Inflation's on the rise everywhere, including the value of the week 10 cream puff game that the SEC plays. Because what happens now in this era of the college football playoff? It's not a 4-team playoff anymore, right? So it's not just 2 games. Now you've got to play 3 or 4. And if you're the SEC, you're definitely thinking about every single year you will have a team there in the playoff that would be in the, hey, we've got to play 4 category, because only one team can win that league, which would mean you get the bye. I guess at least for the next 2 years. We'll see how the formatting is going to work out beyond that. I know nothing is set in stone there. But under the current parameters, you would have one team that gets the bye and could say, all right, we'll play 3 games to win the title. But you're going to have multiple teams in the SEC every single year that will need to play 4 games in the college football playoff to win a national championship. So you are boosting your odds. You are making it better for yourself if you give everybody a nice little rest there in week 10. More important now than it ever was. I mean, it used to be, hey, make it to the BCS national championship game, you get a month off, and then you go play 1 game. Still helpful then, way more helpful now. Way more helpful now. And I get it. There still is going to be some level of time between conference championship Saturday and when all of this really starts, but not nearly what it was back in those days that I mentioned when you have like BCS championship games. So it's a pretty brilliant strategy. It's one I've been jealous of for a long time. And I know you could come back and just say, well, John, I mean, hey, this sounds like a very bitter, jealous take. It kind of is, but it's one of the things that the SEC, one of the subtle things that either the SEC has done itself or that has happened along the way by forces that may have been outside of their control that worked in their favor, that have helped them build this crazy advantage that they've built up now that just frankly wasn't there like 15, 20 years ago when I was growing up as a rabid college football fan. You know, the ESPN media coverage and that fueling itself certainly really helped. But this is the type of thing that's just been brilliant from the word go for the SEC to try and help themselves in the back half of the season. And now, to me, it starts to really underscore one of the differences between the haves and the have-nots in college football right now, because we're sitting here having this conversation about, well, the SEC, they're kicking around like, hey, do we want to go to 9? Reportedly, they would get between $2 to $5 million per school if they were to add a 9th conference game, because on the whole, your TV inventory probably becomes better with that. And the TV networks will pay you. And so as Greg Sankey lied to us, saying it's not about money, it is all about money. That is on the table. But while it is all about money, and that would be the motivating factor in doing that, they don't have to. The SEC doesn't have to. They don't need to. They have plenty of money already. Yes, they are ever so slightly behind the Big Ten with the Big Ten's new media rights deal. The Big Ten somehow, despite being a worse conference than the SEC, will be making more money, but it's not that much. I would not say it's all that consequential. In the light of the House lawsuit, this conversation is kicked back in. People, and they are saying, hey, we need a lot of money here for the rev share. Maybe the SEC will wind up doing it eventually. But the fact that they get the choice, the fact that they even have the choice there, is a huge piece of this divide. Because if you're the Big 12, man, you might even think about going to like 10 conference games because you just need to put as much good inventory out there as you can. And depending on how well teams are able to schedule the non-conference, that 10th conference game may wind up being more valuable for TV. And every single little bit of money that you can milk out of that TV contract, you absolutely need it. And that's why where the SEC can sit here and play 8 conference games and the SEC can sit here and play Louisiana Monroe in week 10, the Big 12 is having to, send conference games to Ireland in week 0, like K-State, Iowa State next year, to generate as much exposure as possible. Talking about playing games on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. Great time slot. I'm all for it. But that is a difficult thing to have to go play a game on a Wednesday. Playing Friday night games. John Wilner, the other suggestion he had, again, I thought it was very good, but was, hey, play conference games in week 1. Try to get some of your best conference games in week 1 on Labor Day weekend and do it on that Sunday when there's nobody else really watching and you can have time slots all to yourself and get as much exposure as possible. That's what you have to do if you're in the Big 12. When you're in the SEC, you can still ponder that competitive advantage piece of this. You can ponder the competitive advantage. All right. You can't in the Big 12. You got to go do whatever is going to get you the money. So I suppose in a roundabout way, maybe I should apologize a little bit here to Mr. Sankey and say that truly they don't have to be quite as hell-bent and driven by money as everybody else. Well, as the Big 12 would be and the ACC. But look, you guys know how I feel about the hashtag vibes. The ACC is kind of a lost cause. So the ACC is in some trouble. They can do whatever they want, but they're not making enough money for Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson to stick around there. That's going to be a problem. Big 12, you're just not going to be able to do it the same way that the SEC is. That is another competitive disadvantage. These are the little ways that the SEC will continue to be able to stay out in front. These are things that may seem small, but when you have a lot of these, they really start to add up. And it's what makes life more difficult for the Big 12. Because like Sonny Dykes says there, hey, we don't get a week off in week 10, because even if we are playing like Arizona State, Cincinnati, BYU, Baylor, whoever you've got at the bottom of the conference, that's not a gimme. Like, that's not a total gimme. Arizona State had some real fight in them last year, even though they finished 3-9. I mean, it's a more dangerous team, certainly, than Louisiana. I'm sorry I keep picking on Louisiana Monroe, but that's tougher than bringing in Louisiana Monroe, right? That's a different mindset that you got to approach that game with. And so it puts more stress on you. These are the things that will continue, and the SEC just leverages the hell out of these. They find every way to utilize their power and their leverage. I mean, Greg Sankey's great at it, as he should be in that position. I'm not necessarily really faulting him. Certainly in a capitalistic mindset, that's what you should be doing. But I just want you to understand, these are the types of things that make life a little bit more difficult for the Big 12. One other thing I want to point out, though, that Sonny Dykes said here. I love that Sonny Dykes said that the SEC is better than all the other leagues combined. And not because I'm some SEC homer, SEC. My team wins 6 games a year, but I'm going to wear the SEC proudly on my chest and ride Alabama's accomplishments. I am not in that boat. Okay, that's not me. But I like that he anointed them above the Big Ten, because you guys know around here, there's nothing that annoys me much more than the Big Ten and how the bottom of that conference is so bad and so many teams really coast in that conference to a frustrating degree by just beating crappy teams in the Big Ten West and elevating them, or, pulling the Penn State route. You go lose to Ohio State and Michigan every year, finish 9-3, 10-2, and go play in the Peach Bowl or the Rose Bowl or whatever. So I like that he's pointing that out, because, the depth in the SEC, there's no question to me. If you're comparing Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida to like Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, give me the SEC teams all day there. Plus, I think their firepower at the top is better anyway. I understand Michigan's the defending national champ. I'll take the SEC all day there. If you're talking about over the course of a season, which is going to be more difficult to play in and compete in, it's generally going to be the SEC. So I love that Sonny Dykes seems to agree with me on that. And maybe we could get Sonny Dykes on here, like ranting about the Big Ten and, taking some more direct shots at the Big Ten. I would love it. If any Big 12 coach would love to do that, I fully support that and I am on board. And I would offer this microphone right here. If you want to come on the show and do it, here it is. You can anytime you'd like to. All right, there's coach one. There is Big 12 coach number one with a little bit of ranting and raving that we are going to get to today. Let's say hello to Houston Cougars Germany. I appreciate you, Houston Cougars Germany. Thank you for being here. Houston Cougars Germany says, Service Johan, greetings from Houston. What do you think about the Eddie Nunez hire? If Houston beats Utah in October, will you wear a Cougars t-shirt on one of your fantastic podcasts Wednesday through or Sunday? All right, let's work backwards on this. If Houston beats Utah, I will, if you send me a Houston shirt, I will absolutely wear a Houston shirt. That's a deal. Everybody mark that. Remember that. If Houston beats Utah, I will do it. In part because I got annoyed with a Utah fan directly right before I came on here. I put out a Twitter poll that I was going to work into the show later tonight that, I thought was pretty clever. Which do you think is more likely? Utah finishes outside of the top four in the Big 12 or Colorado makes the Big 12 championship game? And I had this Utah fan saying, well, that means you're not paying very much attention because Colorado clearly is not going to make the Big 12 championship game. And Utah won 8 games last year with a 4th string this and a 5th string that. So, and I was like, yeah, dude, that's the point. It's a tough one because I don't think Colorado's making the Big 12 championship game. And I don't think Utah is finishing outside the top 4. You just made my point for me about how good Utah is. But, it's this blind, brash attitude Utah fans have coming into the conference. I've said over and over again, the best outcome for Big 12 Twitter, and I'm not saying this just for myself. I don't find myself getting as annoyed by Utah Twitter on a daily basis as many people seem to. But the best possible scenario for Big 12 Twitter this year is that Utah lays a 7-5 egg. That would create the most entertaining Twitter atmosphere on Big 12 Twitter. But so, yes, there's answer number one. And then the other question, what do you think about the Eddie Nunez hire? I don't know a ton about him. I was reading about it right before I came on. Eddie Nunez, if you are wondering who that is, it's the new athletic director at Houston that was just announced within the last couple of days. Was that this weekend or was it late during the work week? Anyway, he is the new AD there. They decided to make a move, and it seemed like most around Houston were in favor of that, felt that was probably a necessity to happen. He's had a nice run at New Mexico, been the athletic director at New Mexico since 2017. To be honest, I haven't looked too much further into it than that. I need to do a little bit more research, but it seems on paper like a fine hire, at least from the very little bit of the resume that I saw of him. So I'll have to do a little bit more digging on that, but I hope for your sake, Houston Cougars Germany, that Eddie Nunez is a fantastic hire. I think he's got a great football coach to come in and work with right away in Willie Fritz. That I can tell you with certainty, I feel very, very good about. So Houston Cougars Germany, thank you for being here. Great to see you, my friend. David, what's up, David? Appreciate you, man. David says, sticking to 8 conference games saves your league as a whole from 8 additional losses. Well, yes. It does. It does. If you're talking about just overall records there, you're going to fare better if you're playing the non-conference games than you are conference games where everybody is guaranteed to lose. Like somebody will lose the games. Yes, that is true. It's going to, I guess we'll find out really back to the Sankey quote about money. Hey, we don't do everything for money. I guess we'll really find out just how money driven they actually are, because if they do this, it will be for more money, and everybody's stressing what's going on with the house settlement and looking at, they talk about the totality of the cost being like $30 million a year. If you're going to up all the Alston stuff, plus the revenue sharing, like everything added up together could be around $30 million. So they are feeling it. Even in the SEC, they're feeling it. And that is something we heard Gene Taylor, K-State's athletic director, say in a clip that I played for you on this show. Like it's not just us. The SEC is feeling it too. Appreciate you, David. Lewis, what's up, Lewis? BYU and Houston will be much better than expected. All right, I like that. There's a good Big 12 hot take. I asked you guys for your Big 12 hot takes. We will get to some more of those from the Twitter crowd, but you can submit yours during the chat here today as well. BYU and Houston will be much better than expected. Houston, if you're just blindly doing it on Willie Fritz, I clearly understand, because I do think he will have success there long term, and he's the type of coach that they really needed, like more of a grinder. Dana Holgorsen was a flashier name and, a sexy offense and all that. Willie Fritz is like he's gonna go get his nose dirty and like do things in a real grinder sort of tough way. I think that's what the Houston program really needed. He's a program builder. He's proven that at virtually every single level of football that exists. BYU, I think so much of it just depends on the quarterback. Like, what kind of quarterback play are they going to get? The defense definitely needs to be a lot better too. But what kind of quarterback play can you get from whoever it's going to be? If it's going to be Jake Ratzloff, or if it's going to be Gary Bohannon, somebody is going to need to step up and play a lot better than what happened last year. The point that I would make for BYU, if you want to, is that they were closer last year than I think people would realize to being, like a 7-5 team. I think it's just easy to write them on. Well, they kind of struggled last year, 5-7 after a decent start. They really tanked. But I mean, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, like they had them very much on the ropes. So it wasn't like they were just getting completely blasted and left behind in every single one of those games. So anyway, I think that's a decent point, Lewis. And Lewis also says, David is right. Play 8 conference games, win 4 out-of-conference games. Yes. It was a good point there, and supplements what I'm saying, about the whole media narrative and fueling itself. I mean, yeah, you're exposing yourself to fewer losses, exposing your teams to fewer losses there. And some of why the SEC is waiting on this to see if they want to go to 9 or not, or what they're going to do, is because they want to see, well, how does a 9-3 team from our league get treated by the playoff? Will a 9-3 team be thrust in over an 11-1 Big 12 team? Like, will we get that little kiss from the committee or not? And that may have something to do with it too. They don't want to be saddling them with extra losses if 9-3 teams aren't going to be respected as much by the committee. Mark, great to see you, my friend. Appreciate you being here. Mark says, Utah fans annoy me too. I'm probably the only Utah fan that was glad we came to the Big 12. BYU and Utah are better together. Mark, I couldn't agree more on the last part. Having the rivalry in the conference is amazing. I very much look forward to that. And I very much respect and admire the fact that you were glad that they came to the Big 12. Look, and I understand, I don't begrudge Utah fans for being upset that the Pac-12 ended. None of that at all. A little more humility coming to this conference would be nice. But if you're going to lament and be upset that the Pac-12 ended, dude, I get it. It was a good conference, a lot of history there, and you guys went in and we're winning the thing. When you were healthy, won the last 2 years when you were healthy, actually in the league there on your way out the door. So I get it. I understand. It's the lack of humility thing coming in here to the new league. Anyway, Mark, appreciate you, my friend. I saw you in the Twitter replies earlier. Hopped all in, ready to go for the show. So I appreciate you being here. Tried to get out the schedule a little bit in advance for you tonight to help you plan around that. So, Mark, thank you for making time, as always. All right, here's what I'm going to do for the Mike Gundy piece of this. I'm going to have to just read you the quote from Mike Gundy. I was having trouble getting the audio piece of this transferred over here. So let's see. No, wrong one. Sorry about that. It would be this one. Okay, so Mike Gundy was pretty fired up in talking about the business of college football. And if there is somebody out there, a coach out there who you would imagine probably is not deep down crazy fond about the way the game is structured and the game is played now, and NIL and the transfer portal and all that stuff, Mike Gundy would be pretty high on that list, okay? But he went on a little bit of a mini rant here and said, hey, he's talking to players, saying we have to tell players, quote, tell your agent to quit calling us and asking for more money. It's non-negotiable now. It'll start again in December. Now we're able to direct ourselves just to football, and that part has been fun. Now, Mike Gundy also said it's been hard to focus on just football because there have been a lot of distractions. And I would point out that Mike Gundy is the source of some of those distractions by his, 4 beers and get behind the wheel, done it 1,000 times. He brought some of that on himself. Now, whether or not that was a direct attempt by him to shield Ollie Gordon from controversy and bring it onto himself, I know I have heard that conspiracy theory out there. Perhaps there's some truth to it. Either way, he has certainly been a source of some of the distractions. But between Ollie Gordon's DUI, between, I'm sure, having to fend off everybody that was coming after Nick Martin and Ollie Gordon, everybody that Oklahoma State had that they had to hang on to, I get it. I'm sure it adds up and it becomes very, very taxing. And there are some things that are very admirable here about what Mike Gundy had to say. I mean, this seemed to draw a decent reaction on Twitter. A lot of people were reacting to it. I don't think this is inherently bad. I don't necessarily think it's over the top good either. I'm kind of neutral on this Gundy quote. I think there are some things on both sides of this that I'm like, hey, great, or maybe I would do that a little bit differently. For one, as a content creator and somebody that covers the league and has dealt with a million press conferences in my career before and seen the worst of coach speak and just boring quote after quote after quote, I very much appreciate Gundy with this. It is a very real, interesting quote that you don't get from a lot of people. Mike Gundy has been excellent at delivering that throughout his career. Obviously, like, people know him singularly for a quote that he dropped like 20 years ago. The guy has been a walking quote for good and bad, and there have been plenty of both throughout his career. So I love that from him. Don't get me wrong. I love Mike Gundy for that. I also do appreciate how, his tone in all of this is kind of like handling it like a business. It's handling it like a business, okay? Hey, this is the reality. They have agents. We're having to hear from these agents who are trying to negotiate for more money, even when we're trying to play football. And there's no room to really do it at that point in time. That's the reality. I'm telling these guys to just cool it with that, because we can't do anything about it. We got to go play football. Very much seems like, something a professional coach might say if they were asked or approached in this sort of way. And actually, the coach really wouldn't. It would be more like the GM, right? You have a different layer there, whereas Oklahoma State or a college program, you're probably taking on a little bit more of that yourself. It's a little less organized. And part of that is because college sports won't do exactly what Mike Gundy is doing here in this quote, like the NCAA. When I say college sports, it's the NCAA. Won't do exactly what Mike Gundy is doing here in this quote, which is treat it like a business. Treat it like what it is. It is big business. That's what he's doing. He's eventually gotten there. And he takes this attitude into other aspects. Mike Gundy and Coach Prime are not really very similar in their approach, who they are, all of that, right? But I heard Mike Gundy say at Big 12 Media Days in Vegas, like, hey, he's great for our league. He puts eyeballs onto TV sets that watch our league, and that's what we need. That's my paraphrasing there, okay? But that is in essence what Gundy said. And I thought, I don't think Mike Gundy is probably a huge fan. I'm just guessing, but probably not a huge fan of a lot of what Deion does and how he operates, especially considering like Oklahoma State. I mean, they don't use the portal that much. They have the second fewest portal additions of any Big 12 school this year. And Colorado is quite the opposite. Prime seeks out the attention. Gundy just said there's been too much attention on things outside of football, all of that. But he's smart enough to know that the business reality is you need a Coach Prime in your league because you need more people paying attention and you need more people watching your league. So Mike Gundy, say what you will about him, has seemingly been able to put aside perhaps some of his personal feelings to realize this is a business. I need to treat it as such. And I can recognize what is good and bad for business. Okay. So I appreciate that about the quote. My only pushback here would be, one, like I said, he was a part of the distraction. If you want to really get nitpicky here, there have been times where Mike Gundy, it's been a minute, but really flirted with some other jobs. Are you really telling me like his agent wasn't doing a little bit of feeling around there in season? I'd have a hard time believing that never happened when all that was going on, but maybe I am incorrect. Maybe I'm mistaken there. I don't know. The one thing I really would say here is, like, I think you run the risk when you have quotes like this coming out, even if you are totally correct that the player doesn't really have any leverage at this point of the year, that there's not really anything that can be done right now. You run the risk of creating kind of a reputation of like, this guy's kind of cranky about players making money or players trying to get theirs. And whether that's fair or not, you don't want to get typecast with that, because people talk. And then, the player's family, the agent, the handler, whoever, they'll start looking at this a little cross-eyed, like, hey, man, I feel like this might have been some subtle shade at me. I didn't really dig that about this. So wait and see, Gundy, what happens in December when we get to December. I don't love this. And Gundy, let's go back in off season, was taking a lot of heat just over a year ago for being too late to really flip the switch on embracing NIL. Oklahoma State fans were freaking out about NIL. We're not doing enough of this. That's why we're losing players. He just didn't have like a great reputation there. If you even go back to, like the Chuba Hubbard thing and the t-shirt, like he'd gotten crosswise with players before. The content of what he's saying, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But if it is something that is not, hey, I'm all for players getting theirs and players getting what is coming to them, if it's anything beyond that, I, as a fan, would always worry a little bit about like, I just hope that doesn't get used against them somewhere. Like somewhere, somebody will do some negative recruiting with it, being like, hey, see this guy? Like, he doesn't want you to get paid. And, people, we've got short attention spans. They may just listen to a little bit of it and make up their mind right there. That would be the only thing that I would say that would concern me a little bit if I were a fan. But I was very concerned, like on behalf of Oklahoma State fans at this time last year, for what was going on with Gundy. And the guy delivered a 9-win season where they go to the Big 12 championship game, right? He figured it out. So what do I know? I am just a mere mortal here compared to Mike Gundy and his coaching chops. But that is one thing long-term I would at least be a little bit leery of. But it seems like most people really love the quote, especially those who get frustrated by the current state of the game and the rules in place of the NIL portal. You love Gundy for that. That is totally fine. Your prerogative. Understood. Now, what I do love is Neal Brown. Okay. I love Neal Brown and what he had to say. And when I said coaches are kind of pissed, Neal Brown is the one that really is fired up here. We're ratcheting up the intensity. We went from Sonny Dykes, who was pointing out something that is probably an annoyance to him, to Mike Gundy, who's being pretty stern about the realities here of the situation of the game, to Neal Brown is just flat out tired of his team being kind of disrespected, man. That is where Neal Brown is at. So let's get to this. Sorry, Sonny. Neal Brown is reacting here before this clips.
Text one of your colleagues.
Neal Brown is reacting here to the fact that there was a top 100 list, the top 100 college football players in America, that was put out by ESPN, and there was not a single West Virginia player included on the list.
Texted one of your colleagues at ESPN the other day. They did this top 100 players list in college football. And I'm like, man, how do you have a job and you're deciding 100 list when like Garrett Green's not on it? And because I don't get it. We got a tackle, Wyatt Milam's going to be either a first or an early second round pick. He wasn't on the list either. And I'm just wondering, did you not get the W as you were looking at players? Because West Virginia, did you not get all the way down to our name? And
well, first of all, very funny with the ending there, but like I'm going to run that back. Neal Brown claims that he texted an ESPN reporter. He's on SEC Network, and he's claiming that he texted an ESPN reporter and said, man, how do you have a job? This list sucks.
Texted one of your colleagues at ESPN the other day. They did this top 100 players list in college football. And I'm like, man, how do you have a job and you're deciding 100 list when like Garrett Green's not on it? And because I don't get it. We got a tackle, Wyatt Milam's going to be either a first or an early second round pick. He wasn't on the list either. And I'm just wondering, did you not get the W as you were looking at players? Because West Virginia, did you not get all the way down to our name? And
Neal Brown's fed up, man. Neal Brown is fed up with the shade. He's fed up of everybody overlooking his team. First of all, I appreciate the balls. I mean, whether or not he actually texted the guy to go on and be like, hey, man, you guys are stupid. I mean, he's basically saying you guys are stupid for not including my players. That's awesome. I love it. The guy's out here fighting for his team. We can have a lot of debates about West Virginia, and there are a lot of debates about West Virginia. They seem to me to be maybe like the biggest wild card team in terms of what I am gauging the perception of the fans are. Because, like I said, I asked for Big 12 hot takes. I get people telling me they're going to miss a bowl game. I get people telling me they're going to win the league. If you're one of the hot take artists that has them missing a bowl, I think you should still very much appreciate what Neal Brown is doing there and appreciate his general attitude. Okay. I'm kind of in the middle on the West Virginia debate because you can say, hey, they're bringing a quarterback with star potential back, a guy who really flashed some star potential in Garrett Green, who he's sticking up for there. Got almost all their skill position players back. They've got 2 really good running backs. They've got most of the offensive line back, and they won 9 games last year. How is this team not ranked in the top 25 and picked 7th in the preseason Big 12 poll? Like, I get all that. I understand the case for more respect that Neal Brown, I'm sure, is trying to help make here. I also understand they missed 4 of the top 6 last year in the schedule. They didn't play Texas. They only beat 1 bowl team in the regular season. So it was a little bit more hollow than it could have been of a 9-win season. And now they get 5 of the top 6 on the schedule this year. And in fact, all 5 of those games are in a row. They've also got to play Penn State and at Pitt in the non-con. It is a much tougher schedule. I'm somewhere in between. But that doesn't matter here. We all should appreciate what Neal Brown is doing and just sticking up for his squad, man. I mean, the guy last year had to deal with everybody talking all offseason about his job status and the fact that he was going to get fired and things were going downhill, a train wreck. It's not in good shape right now. That's what Neal Brown had to hear about all year last year. Then he was picked last in the Big 12. He has to go through the car wash at Big 12 Media Days, knowing, hey, we were the team that was picked last. That's not fun, especially in a year where the league was expanding. There were even more teams. You're looking at this like, man, we've been playing in the Big 12. I'm looking down here. We're 14th. We're 14th. It's not fun. Neal Brown had to deal with that and kind of just take his medicine. And then he goes out there and wins 9 games, brings most of the roster back, including a quarterback. A lot of people might say, well, we're bringing a lot of people back, but what's the quarterback? We got questions there. No, he's bringing the quarterback back. And yet he's picked 7th. He's receiving some votes, but not in the preseason top 25. His players now are getting left off of this top 100 list. It just feels like the no respect thing never ends, I think, if you are Neal Brown in West Virginia right now. So I understand why he is a little bit fed up. And he now has more confidence behind him where it makes more sense to stand up a little bit. Last year, you could do some of that. Now, he did come out and say, like, I don't think we're the worst team in the league, but you got to be a little bit more subdued because things had not been going great. Now you've got something to stand on. You've got a leg to stand on. You got your balance back. He had been hit with a couple of right crosses and was a little bit wobbly. Well, now he's standing up, made it through the 10 count, and he's back out there ready to go. And now he's swinging. Like, now he's coming out, trying to throw some haymakers here. So I love it. Like, what is the downside? I guess would be my question to this. Like, what would be the downside to coming out and acting like this, especially when the key distinction I will make here is this is not Neal Brown coming out saying, you guys are all idiots because you think I should be fired. You guys are all idiots because you thought, I am a bad coach. He's saying you guys are idiots because you don't respect my players. He's fighting for his players here. The big difference and distinction there. Like that will resonate in the locker room. He's talking about their first round offensive tackle. He's talking about their quarterback who has drawn from some, now don't shoot the messenger on this, but has drawn some like Johnny Manziel comparisons. That comp I've seen laid out there by a couple of people this offseason. I mean, Garrett Green has at times, he flashed some real star ability last year. So he's sticking up for his players. Do I think Garrett Green has done enough at this point to earn the distinction as a top 100 player in college football? I mean, I'd have to like really parse the list, what quarterbacks are in front of him and whatnot. But my gut reaction would be to say no. I don't think so. But there's no downside to Neal Brown coming out and saying this guy should be on the list, and you guys are dumb for not putting him on the list because he had a great season, and I love my guys. He's going to get guys to play for him. You're going to need guys to be playing hard for you, and you also are going to need guys to advocate for you if things do get dicey. And that's where I come down to the downside of this to me is non-existent. If they do have a rough year, he's going to have players going to bat for him because he's going to bat for them in the most public way possible. Nothing wrong with standing up for your players in virtually any scenario. Now, to bring Mike Gundy back into it, one of the few times where I remember a coach doing that in a very public way that like didn't really work out and was a little bit complex and awkward and not the best was actually the I'm a man, I'm 40 rant and Bobby Reed, the quarterback who he was sticking up for there. And you can read about that, but that it was not super well received by Bobby Reed. We'll put it that way. But 9 times out of 10, I think if you're going to go stump for your players like Mike Gundy just did there, that's a good thing. That's a good thing to be doing. So I very much was on board with what Neal Brown was doing there. Go down swinging. I think it seems like Neal Brown has really just decided, like, I feel like this is moving in the right direction, and I definitely want to keep pushing and promoting all of that. But even if this thing goes down, if this ship goes down, like, I'm going down swinging. I am not going to be just feebly and idly watching by. Like, I will stick up for my players. I will stick up for this program. That's how I'm going to go out. And you know what? I got to tip my cap to Neal Brown for the attitude on that. So I like it. And once again, I have to say, just like with the Mike Gundy piece of this, it's good content. It's good content. It's giving me good content. So I'm not going to complain. Neal Brown, thank you, sir. I will complain 0% about that because we are getting some good content out of it. All right, we have come to the point where it is time for your guys' hot takes. It's time for your hot takes. I asked on Twitter, it's been maybe a week ago or so, for your hottest Big 12 take for the season. And now we are going to dive into some of those. Utah has already been a topic of conversation tonight, and Utah is a topic of conversation again. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We'll get to there is a Utah one later. First, we've got Derek, who's an Iowa State fan here. My apologies, Derek. Derek says his hottest Big 12 take, Oklahoma State, Iowa State for the Big 12 championship game. Clearly, ISU peas in their Cheerios as per proud tradition. Well, look, if Iowa State makes it to the Big 12 championship game this year and loses to Oklahoma State, I don't see a scenario where you could say, well, that was Iowa State pissing in their Cheerios. Like that'd be a great season. But I understand. Listen, I've spent plenty of time as kind of like a self-loathing, very self-deprecating fan before. So I understand the attitude. But the piece that I really want to talk about here is that Derek says his hot take is that this is Coach Prime's last year at Colorado. He says, I'm not sure if it will be because he wins or loses, but this is it. And the reason I bring this up, Derek, is actually because I would say, is that really a hot take? That seems like a warm take. Maybe I would classify it as a warm take that this will be Coach Prime's last year, because you are right. Like, there are two ways that could go. I mean, way one is where I think most people would start looking at this and being like, well, Shador and Shiloh will be off to the NFL after this year. It feels like kind of a mess. Just lots of players in, lots of players out. There's Coach Prime beefing with the media very publicly. Shiloh had some legal issues. There was the Athlon story. There's just a lot of stuff, like a lot of the extracurricular stuff that's going on. And it feels like a lot, and maybe they won't win many games, and he'll just say, well, my kids are gone. I'm done with this. So that is one thing. I don't think Colorado is, I would have a really hard time seeing Colorado firing him. I don't know what the scenario is where Coach Prime gets fired based on this year. I would think it would have to involve a lot of stuff other than just losing games, like things getting completely wild and out of control. But I'm sure there are those that do think that's a possibility. The other possibility would be he hits the Joel Klatt ceiling. The Joel Klatt, like he was just saying it again the other day, Joel Klatt, that Colorado's got a real shot to win 8 or 9 games, and that would put them in contention for a Big 12 championship and, all of this. Like, okay, Joel. Well, if that were to happen, he should get some attention from other jobs, right? If that were to happen, he should get attention from other jobs. And again, we bring in his 2 sons off to the NFL. Now you've won 9 games. You'll be a hot commodity. Look, Billy Napier, I don't see any way he's getting out of that schedule at Florida this year. Billy Napier gets fired. The Florida gig is open. I don't know. There's something there. Is there something there? Some other job that with a program that's in the Big Ten or the SEC that's absolutely hungry could very well come chasing after him too. I do think that scenario is something that's very much plausible here. So I guess I don't know if I would totally predict it, but I don't think that's like as hot a take as some might think on the surface after seeing it. So appreciate you, Derek, for that one. Let me get the next hot take queued up here. Real quick, I'll bring this up. Infamous front runner. CU has the tools. Don't be surprised, Mr. Soy. Well, can I just point out that the guy who comes in here and is bloviating about Colorado being at the top of the league, his name is Infamous Front Runner. I just want everybody to take notice of this. The guy who is coming on to push for Colorado being a league champion is named Infamous Front Runner. I'll just leave everybody to draw their own conclusions from that, and we can move on. But a simple observation here about where we are at. All right, next hot take. This is where Utah comes in. This is from Ryan. Ryan says Utah doesn't finish top 3. Teams moving conferences have consistently underperformed the first year as they adjust. Utah doesn't finish top 3. How do we feel about that? I do not think I really struggle to find a scenario where Utah doesn't finish in, I guess, like the top 3 or 4. The only thing, and someone did point this out on Twitter, I forget who it was, so my apologies that I'm not going to be able to give you proper attribution here. But somebody did point out there are going to be so many ties because of the unbalanced schedule, and you've got so many teams in the league now that you could have some crazy tiebreaker where, if they're finishing tied for 4th with like 3 other teams, like maybe. I guess that's probably what it would take. And like everything's separated by one team's, somebody runs the table, it's 11-0, then there's a 10-1. What am I thinking? A conference record, whatever. There's a 1-loss team and then a 2-loss team. And then I don't know if they lose 3 and they're in a big tie there. I guess I could see something like that happening. If Utah stays healthy, I don't see a way that they're finishing outside of the top 3. I would have a hard time seeing that because it's a good point that you bring up. In general, yes, teams coming up a league will struggle more. SMU fans, for instance, are very brash and very confident right now. I would anticipate that while SMU does have a solid team, that there will be some growing pains in adjusting to playing ACC level competition week in, week out instead of AAC. All right. The A swap for the C, that one letter does make a pretty significant difference here. So I think that will happen. But Utah, man, when they have Cam Rising, a 7th-year starter at quarterback, and they have Kyle Whittingham, a guy who for 2 decades has just been winning in basically any and every circumstance and multiple conferences. I just think that is enough to keep them from dealing with a whole lot of that. I think they will be fine. I view it like this. I don't know why This is what popped into my head. But I was watching a Mr. Beast video the other day on YouTube where he's like, they go trap themselves in a cave for a week. And they're like walking through this really dangerous cave. And, you know, for most people, it would be a death trap and it would be a lot of trouble for somebody. But he had 2 paid survival experts with him, right? So they're leading him around. That makes a big difference. It turns into just entertaining, fun, lighthearted content as opposed to death trap, right? Well, Utah's got 2 pretty good guides to lead them through this. They've got 2 pretty good guides in Kyle Whittingham and Cam Rising, again, assuming that Rising stays healthy. So I don't think they will have to deal with too many of the pitfalls there. I will also throw this in here at the end on this subject. I'm curious to see what the poll results are because I haven't checked them in a minute. So I put out this poll earlier. Which is more likely, Utah finishing outside the top 4 of the Big 12 or Colorado making the Big 12 title game? So we're still, I mean, it's pushing even closer to Utah. People think it's more likely that Utah finishes outside the top 4 than Colorado in the Big 12 championship game, which I get. I figured, honestly, I probably figured that I should have figured. Let me phrase it like that. I should have figured this is the way it would go because my Twitter audience, they're annoyed with Utah and they're not exactly enamored with Colorado. So the view here would be, well, I don't think there's any way Colorado's making the Big 12 title game. And we kind of want to see Utah struggle. So let's go with the Utah answer here. I do suspect that there is some of that in this, but I do think it's tough because I think Utah finishing in the top 4 is a pretty safe bet. But to use my own point against me, I guess if I were forced to answer, I would say, well, Utah is going to have the injury risk, I suppose, with Cam Rising. Like anybody with a quarterback in the league. But like if you go look through this league, everybody has dealt with so many injuries at quarterback. It's been such a problem for people that there's a better chance of that happening than Colorado actually getting good enough on the lines in one offseason to jump up and make the Big 12 championship game, because that's what it will take. It will take, it's in the trenches. We can talk all we want about Colorado and skill position guys and losing coordinators and coaches and the transfer portal, and it's a mess and blah, 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 blah. What will determine the success of their season is, are they actually legitimately better in the trenches? They may be more talented, but does it come together? Coach Prime at his press conference really brushed off any thought of like chemistry mattering. You know, he really kind of belittled a question that came about chemistry. He doesn't think it's that big of a deal. He thinks they're more talented there. He might be right. We'll see. We'll see. But the most likely thing that could come out of all of that to make one of those scenarios happen would seemingly be, to me, some kind of injury to Cam Rising, not making it through healthy. Just if you're playing the odds and how quarterback play has gone in this league, that would be a part of it. All right, Michael. Michael says Utah got an easy schedule. Conspiracy likely. Man, I don't know. You think Brett Yormark was like just itching to give them an easy schedule upon entering the league? I'm not sure that was an easy one to reel in there. They do have a tough start to Big 12 play where they've got at Oklahoma State and Arizona back to back, but then after that, it is pretty reasonable. At Arizona State, TCU at home, at Houston, BYU at home, at Colorado, Iowa State, at UCF. The other stretch I would point out there at the end of the year, look, if we're going to believe front runner here and that Colorado is going to be a front runner in the league, you do the last 3 weeks of the season have to go to Colorado, play Iowa State at home, and then go to UCF. UCF games on a Friday. And I think that road trip is a really sneaky one in the context of the entire conference season. I'm really, really looking forward to that game. But appreciate you being here, Michael. Thank you for your submission as always. David says Reese Davis is picking the Jayhawks to win the Big 12. Yeah, I addressed it. I can't remember if it was in the mail bag or not, or if it was in the newsletter or not, which, by the way, open for business, the Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. If you want to get Big 12 news and insight to your inbox, filter through the Big 10 and SEC crap, and you just get Big 12 news that matters to the league, ofbnews.com to sign up for the Open for Business newsletter. If you want to support what I'm doing and the channel and my content, that is the best way to do it right now. I appreciate all you guys who have signed up. I addressed it at some point there, again, based on quarterback health, but I don't think that's that crazy of a hot take. There are some variables here, and it is a little bit more than just the quarterback with Kansas because they have a new offensive coordinator, and I think Andy Kotelnicki was a star. I think Jeff Grimes does not have nearly as high a ceiling as Kotelnicki did. They're also not going to be playing straight up home games. I do think that could wear on them, and Iowa State, for instance, is going to be a really tricky one because Iowa State will pack that place with fans. So that will be there are considerations outside of just QB health, but generally speaking, if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, even if they take a step back at OC, that's still with a manageable schedule going to be a team that will compete for the Big 12 championship. So it sounds more hot takey on the surface just because even though most have adjusted now after 2 years of good Kansas football, it still is a little jarring to hear that and think about that. Like, oh, Kansas will win the Big 12. But in my opinion, at least, I don't think that's too terribly wild. Kim, see my 2 earlier posts and have a good show. Okay. Let's see. Kim, appreciate you. Kim said, Utah fans, from what most have observed thus far, make Texas fans look humble, and yet they have 0 natties. Yeah, they have, though, won a hell of a lot more lately, really, than Texas. I mean, I know, okay, Texas went to the playoff last year. Fair enough. But a couple Rose Bowls, a couple conference titles. They've done more winning of leagues lately than Texas has. So they do at least have that. But yes, there are. I see what you're doing there. I give Utah more credit because at least, they're not the trust fund kid, right? I used that comparison a long time ago when it was Oklahoma and Texas when they were leaving. And it's like, all right, Oklahoma's sitting here on their yacht and they have earned it. They have worked very hard. They have performed very well. They've done a great job and they have self-made billionaire. They have all their money. Texas rolls in with the yacht and you're like, dude, that guy just got it from his dad. It was inherited, has not worked a day in his life. Utah is much more the former. So I can at least appreciate that. About them. Kim also said, is it fair to point out how many times Texas finished outside of the top 3 in the Big 12? Well, I would like if someone could give me that info, I would very much like to read it. I mean, I can tell you that Texas went 14 years without winning the Big 12. So they're, basically a decade and a half without Texas actually winning the league. So yeah, that definitely happened. If the point here though is hey, Utah, you can't try to be Texas. All right. Maybe the thing though, Kim, I will say is I doubt, this is where I really default to Kyle Whittingham and his expertise and how good he is. I doubt that you're going to see the team have the same attitude as the fans. I think it's very easy for the fans to be arrogant and overconfident. I don't think Kyle Whittingham will let the team actually do that. But I appreciate your perspective, and I'm always here for a little bit of Texas shade on the show. So thank you, Kim. I appreciate you. Mark, what's up, Mark? Mark says, I'm curious how you feel about the Jayhawks. Do you like to see them win when they are not playing K-State? Well, Mark, you must not have been following me on Twitter for very long. I feel like my Twitter audience can tell you this pretty quickly. I mean, look, no, I have not grown up as somebody who loved to see Kansas win, especially being a kid in the Kansas City area. Because if you are unfamiliar with Kansas City or haven't lived in Kansas City, Kansas basketball in particular, obviously, is what you're dealing with most of the time. But it functions as really the NBA team for the city because it's a basketball crazy town. People love college hoops, first of all. And there's no NBA team to root for. So in the winter, people tend to gravitate towards that. If you are a fan of sports in the area, you gravitate toward it. It was an easy thing to do. And in hindsight, I can understand it. But when you're a K-State fan, it's pretty annoying, and a Mizzou fan for that matter, too. So you deal with a lot of that. It's frustrating. And there's certainly a lot of earned arrogance that comes along with Kansas basketball. I will just say this. There's some shtick involved on Twitter. So, yeah, sometimes you overemphasize a little bit of that to draw a rise, make a point. Like, yeah, I will admit there's been some of that over the years. So, and I'm not as, if you would have asked this question to 15-year-old me who's still in high school, I mean, I think when K-State won in Allen Fieldhouse in 2005, when I was in high school, I think I wore my K-State Cartier Martin jersey for literally like a week straight. I mean, like it mattered more to me then than it does now. I will put it that way. So I hope that answers it for you, Mark. I hope that that answers it for you. Let's see. Outlaw Sports. What's up, Outlaw Sports? Outlaw Sports with Jesse and John. Con time. Deion Sanders and his groupies will lose their bowels this year as the con is up. Colorado 3-9. Wow. All right. Well, we've got a Colorado 3-9 prediction tonight, and then we had the Texas fan front runner coming in and saying that they may challenge for the league title because they've got what it takes. So there's some variance. We have found apparently a team that has more variance in opinion than even West Virginia this year, and it would be Outlaw Sports with Jesse and John. So is there a world? Can I see a world where Colorado goes 3-9? Man, 3-9. That would take a lot going wrong. I could see a world where Colorado goes 5-7 for sure. 4-8 again, like maybe. I feel like their floor is more like the 5-win thing, but I think their like absolute ceiling would be 8. I see them probably somewhere 5 to 8 wins is what I would say for Colorado this year, which is great, by the way, which is great. And this is the problem with how the conversation always gets framed around them. That is great. It would be market improvement. It would be a great sign for Deion and a great coaching job to get them there from where they were at 2 years ago. So, but I respect your opinion, Outlaw. And obviously I do think there are things like outside of just what's happening between the White Lions on the football field that could create more distractions and make things a little bit tougher for them. But appreciate you being here. Thank you for weighing in. I asked for your Big 12 hot takes, and we got a Big 12 hot take there. We got Cat Fan in Huskerland here. Daniel Osborne, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your support of the channel. Not seeing a message attached there, but Daniel, great supporter of the channel. Always pop it in here. Always love to see you, my friend. My best wishes to you and your family. So thank you for being here, and thank you for hanging out. I think that's going to about wrap it up. Let me put out one more plug for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. If you want to be the smartest Big 12 fan in your group chat, if you want your college football news without the BS Big 10 and SEC bias, and you want just Big 12 headlines that matter to the Big 12, sign up for the Open for Business newsletter, ofbnews.com. You can also find a link in the description of this video if you are so inclined to visit that way. ofbnews.com to get the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Spread the word about that if you guys have been enjoying it. Lots of great feedback on that. And we've got 1,900 plus subscribers already to the newsletter in just about 6 weeks. So 1,900 people have never been wrong. Literally, a group of that many people has never been wrong about anything. That is a fact. So I think that should support well enough what it is that I'm trying to do. Daniel, beating the buzzer. Appreciate you, Daniel. Daniel says, with me growing up in KC, I have a love-hate relationship with KU. I hear a lot of what you're saying about KU. I didn't realize you grew up in KC, Daniel. That's good to know. That I feel like is because then when I lived in Manhattan, then I did 10 years in Manhattan when I was working full time. And there were two things that happened there. One, I was working in media, right? So full time doing it like that, you become less of a fan in general. I became much less of a fan in general just because like you have to work and it's different and you're sometimes rooting for, good content as opposed. So that shifted it a little bit, but also like I was in Manhattan, so I was always around like-minded people when it came to K-State. So you become more annoyed and some of the like, oh, I really dislike these guys, the more that you're like around that and inundated by it. And that's what happened in Kansas City, especially like as a kid, when you're like a younger kid, you're looking around like, oh, dude, like this kid doesn't really care, doesn't care as much as I do, but he'll just wear the KU t-shirt and like talk smack at school. Like there was a lot of that. So it gets old. So glad to know that you went through the same thing with me, Daniel. I appreciate you, man. I would also just point out too that like some of my absolute favorite people in like media and college sports are associated with KU. Like Brian Haney, who's the play-by-play voice of Kansas, is legitimately one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. I mean, one of the nicest human beings on planet Earth. Great guy, and was very helpful to me, and remains a friend, has just always been a really, really good dude. Colin Sexton, who's a K-State guy who works in the athletic department over there at KU. Great guy. Always love running into him and seeing him. There are a couple of guys that I know just in the professional world in Kansas City now with a day job that are one like a professor at Kansas. Just a great guy. Love talking to him. Like, so it's nothing personal, right? I do want to point that out as well. Michael, what's going on, Michael? Michael says, hot take, BYU wins 9 games with a win over K-State. Well, Michael, if you watch the 3 Mob podcast, my K-State podcast that I do on KC Sports Network, you would know that you're not going to get a ton of pushback from me on that because I picked K-State to go 9-3 this year. I had to be the kind of anti-homer on the show. I took a lot of crap from my co-hosts, particularly one, what's up, Cole, for picking K-State actually to lose that game at BYU because it felt to me like just a tricky spot. It's right after the Arizona game, which I think K-State will win, and that will be Friday, Big Fox, hyped up matchup, lot of excitement for that. And then you've got to go right on the road to a team that is not highly there are not high expectations for that team. It's not a real sexy name this year. You're going to go play in the altitude in a tough place to play. And Chris Kleiman has typically had a game per year where they just come out with like kind of flat and a subpar effort. I felt like, I don't know, man, a lot of that kind of adds up to the BYU game. I feel like that's a spot that would make sense for it. So I actually picked them to lose. I did pick them to lose that game. So no crazy pushback from me here on the K-State bar. Now 9 games a little strong. I don't know. I don't see the quarterback play there for 9 wins, Michael, but I really like the BYU fan base. I'd be thrilled if it happened. I would be thrilled for BYU fans if that did happen. And Alan, what's going on, Alan? Great to see you here. Alan says, John just designated a conference room in the big screen in our new office as the official Big 12 game room. All right. We have 3 KU grads, 1 West Virginia, and 1 Oklahoma State. Got to have priorities. Alan, that is exactly how you have priorities. I like that. It reminds me of K-State's old football complex in the Bill Snyder days. They had the Big 8 room. And the Big 8 room was like where the press conferences happen. So when I first started reading that, I was like, oh, it kind of makes me a little nostalgic there. Reminds me of the Big 8 room. Big 12 game room. Love that. Got to make sure that it's up there. If you guys are you having to work on Saturdays, though? That's a bummer if people are having to get in there and work on Saturdays. That would be my only concern, Alan. Are you guys working on Saturdays? Or are we talking about like watching replays throughout the week? You know, somebody records it on YouTube TV. You just flash it up there. That would be my hope for you, Alan. That would be my hope. I don't want anybody working on Saturdays through the games. Although I guess depending on what the job is, I can understand if you have to. Anyway, thank you, Alan. Appreciate you being here. Always love hearing from you and always love seeing you here on the show. All right. Guys, I think that is going to do it tonight. OFBnews.com. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Would appreciate it if you did that. Spread the word about the channel. Like the video. Make sure you're subscribed if you have not subscribed yet. All of that stuff would be very, very helpful to me. Social media, Twitter, X, Threads, Instagram, wherever you're at. Push the channel. Push the newsletter. Let's continue making this community bigger and bigger. Thanks, guys. Take care, and I will talk to you all soon.